the person born blind. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples said to him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "Yes, it is he." Others were saying, "No, it's someone like him." But he kept saying, "I am the man." They kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and recovered my sight." They said to him, "Well, where is he?" He said, "I do not know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been born blind, and so they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How now then does he see?" His parents answered, "Well, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But we do not know how it is that now he sees. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, though, is that I was blind, and now I see." They said to him, "Well, what did he do? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I've told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple. Well, we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Here is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sins, and you are trying to teach us." And they drove him out of the synagogue. Jesus heard that they'd driven him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "Well, who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshipped him. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near Jesus heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." This is the gospel of the Lord. A long gospel. It's a story about opening eyes. A blind man who gets his sight, but he gets more than sight. He gets also awareness, perception, insight. It's a great story. And the blind man really represents all of us. We are all person born blind. The challenge in life is to try to gain not just sight, but insight, perception, and awareness, as this blind person does. You notice how he changes, he's transformed in the story, not just in getting his sight, but in many other ways. At the start of the story, he's kind of shuffled around from here to there, and he doesn't seem to have much ability to take charge of his own life. He's very dependent on others and really a victim of others. But by the end, he's quite different situation, although he's still excluded from society, but in a different way. Excluded as a result of the decision he's made. He's become a person. He's no longer an object. Part of becoming a person is that he's able to think for himself, make his own decisions, and take the consequences of them. And he decides to be a follower of Jesus. He finds his voice. Here in Hong Kong and elsewhere in the world, we're in the midst of this crisis caused by the coronavirus. Can this be a time when we're not just able to see our world, but to also have insight into our world? In other words, after the virus has gone, the crisis has gone, what will we have learned? At the moment, we're in the middle of it, and for one thing I'm learning is contentment. It can be frustrating at the moment. I'm not able to do the things I used to do. A trip I was planning to Europe this summer has been cancelled. I was going to lead a pilgrimage to Oberammergau for the once in 10-year play that's been cancelled for 2 years. I'm not able to go back to see my family in England as quickly as I'd like to. And here in Hong Kong, my movement is quite restricted. I'm not able to enjoy the church life as we used to. Now we're doing worship in Zoom. I miss the people in church. But I'm learning to be content and grateful for all that I do have in my life. I hope that we can learn some bigger lessons as a community, as a people, also in and through this coronavirus. I do hope that we'll be able to do some things differently afterwards. We think about at the moment how the environment is taking a kind of well-earned respite from the damage that our human activity is causing it. Here in Hong Kong, we're used to pollution, but it's curious, over the last month or so, we have in fact no pollution. Clear skies. It is cloudy sometimes, but it's a natural cloud, not smog. And I understand all across the world it's the same. Rivers are being cleaned up, the air is cleaner. I hope also one thing we can learn is how interdependent we are as people all across the world. The virus does not discriminate, as humans tend to do. The virus sees us, ironically, as we really are, as a lesson for us. The virus sees us as human beings, sees us in our fragility, our vulnerabilities, as well as our potential. If only we can do the same. We have to work together at the moment to find a cure and to protect those who are most vulnerable. Can we carry on doing that? Can we really learn from the situation we're going through? In the gospel story, the man gets sight and insight because Jesus is the light of the world. That's how we get insight as human beings, through being vessels, as it were, of Christ's light, letting us see the world through the eyes of Christ, letting Christ open our eyes so that we gain insight, perception, and awareness as to who we truly are, and our relationships with one another, and our need for one another. And hopefully then, as we find out who we truly are, we find ourselves, and as in the story, we are actually saved.